In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit, amen. Direct, O Lord, our actions by thy holy inspiration, and carry them on by thy gracious assistance, that every word and work of ours may begin in thee, and by thee be happily ended. Amen. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit, amen.
Amen. All right. Who in this room would like to get married? All right. Okay.
Listen closely to the second question.
Who would like to have a happy and lasting marriage?
Okay. It's a little bit, just so you know, if nobody raised their hands at that point, we didn't really have a plan B, so I'm glad you guys did.
Good. Okay, so here's the thing. People don't get married with the intent to be unhappy and not lasting. And yet it seems that a lot of people tend to date in a way that doesn't actually set them up for a happy and lasting marriage.
Which is weird. You would think that you would want to date in a way that led to a happy, lasting marriage. Turns out, many people don't know how to date, which is why we're here. You're welcome. So tonight, we might not be able to tell you everything about what goes on from the beginning to the end of a romantic relationship that leads to a happy, lasting marriage, but we'll at least give you a bit of a roadmap from wherever you happen to be right now to at least a few steps further down the lane.
Now, here's the thing. Most of what we see in the world today about romantic relationships is actually giving us the opposite of what we need to have a happy and lasting marriage. We don't need to spend very much time with this, but if you've watched a movie with any romance in it, you've probably realized that that doesn't accord with reality. And if you yourself are from a broken home, there's a decent chance that somebody sitting next to you is, if you aren't. And so we know that we're in a difficult situation in terms of how we have been formed to see romantic relationships and how we've experienced them in other people's lives around us.
That being said, we're here to give you hope. We have seen people who have been malformed, people who don't know what a romantic relationship ought to be, both because of the culture at large or because of their home situation, actually go on to be happily married. So there is hope.
We've even reoriented our own misunderstandings and wrong expectations for our own marriage to be happier.
It turns out we also grew up in like a messed up culture. Who knew?
And here's the thing, what happened before our wedding day had a lot to do with setting us up for that success.
Which means that the roadmap doesn't begin with the wedding day, it begins much, much, much before. It doesn't even begin, truth be told, with the day that you first, men, ask a woman out, or women when you were first asked out. It begins, begins by looking in the mirror, doesn't it? The first step is actually addressing whatever is going on interiorly. And so we can break this down to three main categories. One is having a good relationship with this God fellow. He's actually next door right now. You can wave to him if you like. Turns out being in touch with the guy who loved you so much that he brought you into existence and sustains you in every moment, both at your highest and your lowest, he is still sustaining you. Having a relationship with that guy is actually a pretty decent foundation for everything else.
Mm-hmm. Also, learning about yourself, being able to be realistic about what's going on in your own life, being the sort of person that somebody else would want to marry, which means if you're struggling with addiction or other serious sin, addressing that, finding help, being able to go to confession, figuring out what needs to happen so that those things are not impediments to being in a romantic relationship.
And the third thing, prior to even going on dates, is having authentic, virtuous, Christ-centered friendships. And we're going to say something that may sound a little radical. men having good, solid friendships with other men, and women having good, solid friendships with other women. Do you want to elaborate on that a little bit?
So there's several reasons why this is really important. One, it teaches us to love our neighbors well without the charge of romance, which is it's a helpful thing. Another thing that's really helpful about having good friendships is, God willing, if and when you do start dating, if that's where the good Lord is calling you, it gives you a litmus test to whether or not the person you're dating is actually helping you be a better version of yourself or not.
Also, we all have moral blind spots. We have actually deceived ourselves into thinking that we're much better than we are. So to have a friend who can tell you, or a friend who can tell me, you're not actually as good as you think you are, and here's a particular thing that you've done that you actually need to do better in. If you don't have a friend who can actually offer you encouragement as well as correction, may I invite you to find such a person.
And again, that kind of thing is really important in married life. And if you can learn how to have that kind of friendship with somebody without the charge of all the things that come along with married life or romance, then you're learning one thing at a time instead of many things at a time. So that can be very helpful. Okay, so love of God, love of neighbor as yourself, neighbor being same-sex friendships in this context, knowing how to take care of yourself so that you can actually love your neighbors well. Getting these things into place is the first step. We will now actually talk about dating.
Are you guys ready? Okay, you are. Great.
This guy is.
Yeah. Okay, so here's the thing. If you are Catholic, you cannot date the way that the rest of the world is dating. Which is good news because, as far as we can tell, most of the rest of the world isn't actually dating. So just by deciding to go on dates with people, you're already going to be different than the rest of the world.
So we've talked a little bit about different preparation for dating, being intentional about love of God, love of neighbor, and love of self. There's also a different way of dating, and there's also a different purpose for dating.
So let's begin with the purpose, because we actually need to have an end in mind if we're going to do anything. Like if you wanted to build a chair and you didn't know what a chair was, good luck. That's like one of the basic philosophical things. You either talk about a chair or a table, because most philosophers, they just do a lot of thinking and a lot of writing. So it's like, what should I think about? Oh, a chair, because that's what I'm sitting on. Philosophy. It's weird. So beginning with the end in mind, the end of dating is to find your vocation. Probably marriage. Not always, but probably marriage. So let's be really clear on this point. The point of dating isn't because you found your spouse already. It's to feel out whether a person is someone that you would want to marry. So a question that we often get, which is an odd question from a lot of different perspectives, but it's a question nonetheless, so let's give it the dignity of voicing it. How do I know if they're the one? Have you ever heard that question? Thought about that question? And it's like a weird thing because so many people ask this question before they've even gone on a date with someone.
All right, I'll tell you all when I knew that Joseph was the one. I was at the back of a church wearing a pretty white dress.
Uh-huh.
He was at the front of the church wearing a very nice tuxedo. And
I looked very good in a tuxedo.
He does. I walked down the aisle and we made some promises to each other. And then I was like, he's the one. Now
That
it's
easy.
time.
That easy. So if you're not in a church and like coming together and exchanging vows, they're not the one yet. Does that make sense? There's a lot more we could say about this whole is she the one or is he the one? Like the question of the one for what? Because there's this odd belief, I think, from like this sort of Disneyfied idea of romance, that if this is the one, I will not have conflict with this person ever. And we will never suffer together. So is this the one who will deliver me from all of my suffering and fix all of my problems and be my everything to me? Like, oh, that's a lot about me, isn't it? I wouldn't actually feel very comfortable if she was asking if I could do all of those things for her, because obviously I can't. I don't know if you guys don't know me. I'm not very good at most things. So the possibility of me being able to satisfy her on every level and to preserve her from suffering and to never have conflict with her is nil. That is the possibility.
Now,
None.
you may find in your heart of hearts, no, but I really desire a perfect spouse. And there's like something deep in me where I really feel this desire for a perfect spouse. Again, he's over there.
Oh, yeah.
You can visit him and then maybe talk to Father about celibate vocations if you would like a perfect spouse. Which is,
It's totally a possibility.
It is.
This is the wonderful thing about being Catholic, is that if your heart is saying, I want the perfect spouse, we have a vocation for that. We actually have several different kinds of vocations for that. They're just not matrimony.
But if you're still feeling like, no, yep, I think I'm called to matrimony, I want to figure out if somebody's the right person for me.
I'm willing to settle for someone imperfect.
We can move on to more about dating. So, the different preparation, if dating is for marriage, is being free to marry. So these are the things that we talked about earlier in terms of being self-evaluative, being free of addiction and serious sin, which is really difficult in the age of the smartphone, but it is possible, and seeking healing from past wounds and trauma is an important piece of the puzzle. Part of the preparation, too, is knowing what we're getting into. So we really recommend, if you are able, to find couples and spend time with them. So like go find a parish and go find a family that you like the looks of them and be like, hey, can I come over for dinner and help you with your kids sometime? They will love it, probably. And if not, then try someone different.
Literally, we've served on several different campuses over the years as Catholic missionaries, and single women, college women, would go to Crystal and say, how can I spend time with you? And she would
I
say,
would say, come over. You can sweep my floor or help me with my dishes or help me put my kids to bed. I had one of my single friends, she would come over when Joseph was traveling and she would have dinner with me and help me put the kids to bed, and we would hang out afterwards and we would fight with each other about who was getting the better end of the deal, because she got free dinner and she got to play with kids and I had adult conversation and company. It was great.
gentlemen, I don't know if there's an easy way for you to insinuate yourself into family life. But ladies, there's an easy way.
Probably try something similar-ish, or at least get a dinner invitation if you can. So having time around other joyful families is really great preparation. And then in terms of a different way of dating, one of the things that I'd like to start with saying is that if you want to take marriage seriously, you should actually take dating less seriously.
Would you say that again?
If you want to take marriage seriously, take dating less seriously. Oftentimes, in trying to get away from the hookup culture that happens in a lot of places, we see in Catholic communities where they're like, well, but I want to be serious and I want to discern marriage. But you can't be serious and discern marriage with somebody with whom you have not had very much of a conversation. So not having high expectations for the first couple of dates helps lower the seriousness and makes it a lot easier to start to get a feel for if you want to be more serious.
Okay, so we talked about the end of dating is to find a spouse. That means you don't know who your spouse is when you start, and that is actually the point, right? You haven't said, I am going to be Mrs. So-and-so, because my name sounds so good with his last name. And you haven't said, she is going to be my wife. I've had a crush on her for 3 years, and I'm going to finally ask her out, eventually. That doesn't work. That is not a good formula for dating. Okay. So now we're actually going to talk about dating. And we have 3 things to say at first that should be very helpful.
The first one is be interesting.
More difficult for some people than others, I get it. But be interesting.
Love the things that you love. Do things that you enjoy doing. Spend time with people and activities that bring you to life and be willing to share and talk about them. Be interesting.
The next one, this one's easier. Be interested.
So what this looks like is when you meet somebody, anybody, it doesn't even have to be somebody that you're interested in dating. Be interested in them. They're a person. They're a unique and unrepeatable mystery that God created. Pay attention. Ask questions. Find out what's interesting about them. Be interested in them. And then when somebody stands out to you and you think, I actually would like to learn even more about this person. I find them particularly interesting.
Do you know what you do then? Show interest in them. Blowing your minds right now. I get it. I get it. I get it.
So, practically speaking, ways that you can show interest. You can show interest with your time. Spend a little bit more time talking to somebody that you're more interested in. Spend more time in their space, in conversation.
If you're at like a Catholic event, at like a Catholic center, and you spend an hour and a half there, and you spend 30 minutes with one person of the opposite sex, and then split up the rest of your time pretty equally amongst several other people, that 30 minutes shows that you were interested in that person. And it might even show, depending on how they were responding to you hanging around them, it might show if they're interested as well. So time, one way.
Words, saying, that was really interesting. Thank you for sharing.
Or I really enjoyed time with you. I really enjoyed this activity with you. It's this weird thing. We don't actually know what other people are thinking or feeling or desiring unless we do this really weird thing, which is like vibrating air at them in like a concentrated burst with some kind of like vowels and consonants. Like we actually have to say these things out loud.
Okay, so time, words, and actions.
Deeds. Right. So if, say, you were at a dinner and you noticed somebody that you were interested in finished their plate and it's a disposable plate and you say, hey, can I get that for you? Or if you're like, oh, I think I'd like to bake a tray of brownies for, let's say there's like a Bible study for the men or a Bible study for the women. I'll bake a tray of brownies for that Bible study and give it to the person that I'm interested in.
Now, here's the thing, ladies.
This is very helpful. Listen to her, please.
If you are interested in someone and you show interest in them and they're not interested in you, they won't notice. So you don't really have very much to lose in this. If you show interest in them and they are interested, they'll hopefully notice. And unfortunately, if you don't show interest and you're not interested and they're interested in you, they'll still think that you're interested. So that's the downside of this. But this was when I was very interested in Joseph, and I spent more time with him. I said very kind things. I did nice things for him. Not a clue. Clearly it all worked out in the end for me, but...
What did you actually have to do?
I had to tell him.
She had to vibrate air at me.
Now, speaking of vibrating air at people, what should the men do?
Gentlemen, do I have your attention? Yes. If you are interested in a woman, ask her out on a date.
We're gonna get specific.
Whoa. All right. And when I say date, I mean something that is low stakes, which means if they say yes or if they say no, feelings won't be hurt. Low commitment. This is not a marriage proposal. You're not going steady. You're not saying, we're actually going to like sign some contracts right now. Low commitment. Low cost. You're not going to the fanciest establishment in Dayton, Ohio. You're not taking her out for like a chariot ride somewhere, like coffee or milkshake or a walk in the park that's actually free. Those are low cost. They're in public, these first dates, in public. And they're probably short. You don't want to do what one of our friends did when we set him up with someone. We were living out west, and he decided he loves hiking. He decided to take this woman on a 3-hour drive into the mountains for a 3-hour hike, and then a 3-hour drive back.
Don't recommend.
That was their first date. It was their last date.
Yeah. Okay, so just to review, low stakes. You're not putting everything on the line here, which is another reason to ask like early on in the interest, so it's not too built up in your head.
Don't have a crush on them first that you've nursed along for months and months and months.
Low commitment. This where this doesn't have to be a big deal. Low cost, in public, and short. And here's something that's really important. The word date.
Oh, does anyone know the etymology of the word date? No? Oh. Father, do you know? How much Latin did they make you take?
5 semesters.
Okay. So you covered this in first semester of Latin because it's a first conjugation verb. Do, dare, dedi, datus. Datus, fourth principal part.
Is that to give?
To give. Yes. A date. You'll be here all week, folks. A date is that which is given, which means there are no strings attached, which means there are no obligations, which means that there is no transaction. It is the beginning of feeling out whether or not the two can participate in an economy of gift, which is what a home is made of, because a home is a reflection of the divine economy, which operates entirely on grace. All is gift in God, and in the home all is gift, which means a date is the first time where you say, I would like to make this very small little gift of a little bit of time to this person to get to know them better. Part of the no obligation means that no matter how many dates you've been on, you are never obliged to continue dating because there was no obligation in dating. Just because you said yes to one date does not mean you are set for going on a second date. Mm-hmm. Does that make sense? Does this accord well with your experience of what things ought to be?
Yes.
Good.
And here's the other thing. With this is when we're on low stakes, low commitment, low cost, in public, short dates that are with the spirit of gift, that are gift, you can go on first dates with different people over the course of time.
Even like I go out on a date on Monday with one person, one girl, in my case, and then on like Friday I could take a different girl out. No problem, because there was no commitment, there was no obligation, it was low stakes, there was low commitment. And I was able to communicate that very clearly to both of the women. That's where we're at. Because leaving it unstated just leaves it open for the other person to imagine what the commitment might be and what the stakes might be. And you don't need to do that to the ladies, fellas. You can just say, no, I'm going to be utterly clear so that we can be utterly free in the beginning of this relationship.
Now, this is where people start to be like, I'm skeptical of this, Grubers. I don't know how I feel about this. And so I'd like to share a story about, I almost used their real names. I'm going to share a story about Jane. We'll call her Jane. That is not her real name. Jane heard us give this advice, and she's like, I'm going to give it a try. She was a teacher. So she took a summer, and she's like, I'm just going to see how many first dates I can get over the course of the summer. She ended up going on, I think, 6 first dates over the course of the summer. 3 of those guys asked her out. Well, more than 3 of them asked her out on a second date, but 3 of them she said yes to a second date. 1 of them she did not. So she went on a second date. And then I think one of the guys she went on a 3rd date with. And throughout all of this, she was making sure it was low stakes, low commitment, in public. There was economy of gift going on, which also, just to like say it to be clear, that also means there's no like physical affection going on other than like maybe like a quick hug. Okay. So also that helps to maintain purity, because if you're going on different dates with different people, you're not going to get overly physically anything with somebody because you've got a different date with Paul this weekend. Sorry.
Oh, it's okay. We're married.
Okay. So Jane's going on all these first dates, couple second, 3rd dates. School year starts up again. She's like, meh, none of them are worth spending time with in the middle of teacher prep life, all these things. So she didn't continue to go on dates with any of them and didn't look for more first dates. And then she gets invited to a wedding. But she doesn't have anybody to go with to the wedding, and none of her friends are going to the wedding. But she decides to go anyways because she's been being adventurous and this sounds like fun. And she gets sat at a table with a bunch of other single people at the wedding. And Jack was at that wedding, sitting at the table.
He was interesting.
And she was interested.
And she showed interest.
And so did he. And so he got her number, and they went on a date. And they said, well, this was nice. We should do this again. And so they went on another date. And then another date. And then they were both like, well, at this point, I'm not going to keep going on dates. I'm not going to go on dates with other people because I've done that, and you're a lot more interesting than any of the other people I've gone on dates with. I'd like to keep going on dates with just you. And this was mutual. We went to their wedding last fall. It was really lovely. So talking to Jane about this, one of the things that she experienced in being able to go on dates with different people over the course of time is that when she did meet somebody that was a better fit for her, she was a lot more comfortable in her own skin. She didn't freak out. But also, she was a lot more confident that he was actually what she was looking for and that they were a good fit for each other.
So we might have questions about, like, that's okay. You might have questions about some of the things happening during the dating experience that maybe we should help cover. And we're going to classify these under the heading of awkward conversations. We still have a few more minutes. I'm going to go through them if that's all right with you. So, awkward conversation number 1, whether or not you enjoyed the date and whether or not you'd like to go on another date. That's an awkward conversation for a lot of people. And we think that somehow we're risking a lot by telling the other person about how it went and being clear with them, so that both of us can be free about our next steps forward. But we actually kind of need to communicate these things. And if nobody's going to tell the guy that he's actually really awkward and creepy, then he's always going to be awkward and creepy. So it's sort of up to you, ladies, to tell them that. And gentlemen, if there was anything wrong with women, you would have to be able to communicate that as well.
And this also sets you up for being able to have awkward conversations. We talked very early on about wanting to have a happy and lasting marriage. Part of that is being able to have hard, awkward conversations with somebody, with the same person, for the rest of your life.
Which is a long time. A lot of things happen in the rest of your life.
So being able to start with having an awkward conversation like, hey, I really enjoyed this date.
You actually should find somebody that you can have that kind of awkward conversation with. Because you're dealing with finding someone that you hopefully will be able to raise children with. Possibly you will be burying parents with. You might, God forbid, be burying your own children. And you will be at each other's bedside. Well, one of you will be at one's bedside when they're dying. The other one will have to linger. Unless you guys both go at the same time. That does happen.
Yeah.
So awkward things, right? Awkward things you have to navigate. Another awkward conversation.
So this is another question that people ask kind of like the one where there's actually kind of probably a better question to ask. And this is the how far is too far when dating question. And we really love to give the language of affirming versus arousing. Arousing is something that married people call foreplay, and it doesn't belong in the context of a dating relationship.
Doing things to intentionally arouse myself or her, that is so that we might consummate our marriage. That's what it's for.
So if you're not married, staying in the realm of affirming is a great place to be. Now, here's the thing. That's difficult.
Why is that difficult?
So it's difficult for several reasons. One, if you are dating somebody that you like, that you think you'd want to marry, they're probably attractive.
Ideally, they're attractive. If they're not attractive, stop dating them.
Right? So it's a good thing if this is challenging. In fact, if this isn't at all hard, then it's probably not good. So what do we do with this? So one, again, it's an awkward conversation. Use the language. Is this affirming or is this arousing? Just put it out there and find out. And some things to keep in mind. One, context matters. If you're on the way to your grandmother's funeral and your girlfriend puts her hand on your knee, that might be very affirming. If you're in a dark room on a couch watching a movie, which you should not ever be if you're dating.
Just don't
I just
do that.
don't recommend it.
Just
That would not
don't
be
do
affirming, most likely. So putting yourselves in contexts where you're less likely to have arousing interactions be easier is really helpful. And then the other things is, so men, when they hit puberty, become fertile, and then they're fertile until the day they die. Women have a cycle where they're only fertile for like a couple of days in every month. And how women feel at that time of their cycle is how men feel all the time, which is easier to be aroused.
Is that helpful, ladies, to hear? That is the cross that men bear.
So there's that. And then also, ladies, if you're like 1 week, I think this guy's super attractive, and the next week, I super don't. It might actually have just to do with like your biology, where you're at in your cycle. So these are just, again, this is awkward, right? But this is important to keep in mind if we want to pursue a faithful, happy marriage, and we want to take into account the real struggle that purity is, especially in our over-sexualized culture. Okay, so awkward conversation about whether or not you liked dating, awkward conversation about things being arousing or affirming.
Generally, being able to give feedback to the other person that they can receive. Oftentimes you hear the language about like looking out for red flags, which is putting feedback all in the negative. We actually need positive feedback, so we would recommend being able to communicate green lights, things that you think are like, oh, this makes me want to spend more time with you. Yellow lights, these are things that confuse me and perplex me about you, but perhaps there's an explanation. And red lights, when you did this thing, I came to a full stop, and I'm seriously questioning why we're in any kind of a relationship. Being able to communicate, green lights, yellow lights, and red lights, looking for people where it's mostly green, and being able to also talk about a red light if it comes up. If you're looking for someone who's so perfect that nothing will ever give you pause, you will not find them. But if you find someone that you can communicate about those things that give you pause and seek healthy resolution, that is a wonderful thing.
Mm-hmm. And then being able to have conversations where you might have different opinions is also helpful. So things like faith, politics, family, career, right? All these
Awkward things.
Awkward things. Finding somebody that brings out the best in you and that you bring out the best in them is a great goal to strive for, which is also a reason why having these same-sex friendships is helpful, because they can help you see where you might not be able to see, oh, this person is actually bringing out the best in you or not.
Can you see why having good friends might be important for that one? It is really important. Not only are there like moral blind spots, but there's like this romantic blind spot when we're really smitten by someone and we don't realize that we have become less of ourselves rather than more than what we were before. Mm-hmm. We want to find someone who draws out the best in us. Mm-hmm. But just in general, ladies and gentlemen, our encouragement is to have freedom and clarity throughout. And then you'll not only date like a Catholic, you'll marry like a Catholic.
There we are. Timing wise, we could take a few questions if that works for you guys.
Are there?
Yeah.
How important is it to, would you say it's important to find contentment with being, I actually go to a different kind of church, and I did like someone for a while, but a few of the guys were teaching me about contentment and how that's important before you are to get in any kind of relationship, with contentment being single. Would you agree that that's important?
Yeah, that's those first 3 steps. You want to be living out a full Christian life before you start dating. This is a weird thing about the sacrament of matrimony. So this is not going to apply so much for you if you're not in the Catholic bubble, sphere, world. But for other people, and this will maybe...
I grew up Catholic, I understand.
Oh, great. So most of the other sacraments are for your sanctification, right? So you were baptized to become a son or daughter of God. You were confirmed to receive the Holy Spirit. You receive reconciliation when you've damaged your relationship with God. You receive the Eucharist because that is the life of Christ. You receive the anointing of the sick when you are in danger of death and the like. There are 2 sacraments that are not for your sanctification. One of those is holy orders. Father received that one, not so that he would be a saint, but so that he might help others be saints. The other sacrament that is not ordered toward your own sanctification, but is actually ordered toward the salvation of others, is the sacrament of matrimony. The vision of the church, when she thinks about the sacrament of matrimony, she is thinking about 2 disciples of Christ coming together to form a bond that images Christ and the church, and that they become permanent teammates on mission as lay people to sanctify the temporal order in the home and in the world. Mm-hmm. And so the idea of dating and then marriage is that it's 2 mature Christian disciples who have a loving relationship with God and with neighbor, and they know how to love themselves rightly. Mm-hmm. Those are the people who should be going out and dating.
I think contentment is a good word to summarize that experience.
I wouldn't use that word. But if that's what they mean, then yes. Is that helpful?
It was.
Okay. I'm so glad. I hate it when speakers answer questions and they don't check to see if it's helpful. Yes. Yeah. That was your hand, right? Okay.
What would you say to a person if they were not Catholic, or they were Catholic but just not following their faith like you do?
That you're romantically interested?
Yeah, that you are interested in, yes. And you've been talking, and in some questions, like the awkward questions come through, and you're like, oh yeah, I'm not Catholic, or they're not Catholic, or they're not following their faith in that way, and what do you do about that in that situation?
So it depends. Yeah, so I think it depends on how. So this is part of the thing with going on multiple dates and progressing in level of seriousness, because if you can have those conversations, you get to decide early on. Okay, do I like this person enough to keep going on dates with them? And if you're going on dates with other people, also, you can start to get a feel for whether or not you like them enough to have those particular awkward conversations or not. And then if things are getting more serious, where it's I'm wondering if this is somebody that I want to marry, I think doing a study together of what do our faith traditions really teach about what marriage is, and how do we see that fitting together in a life together. And then the other thing is spend time with couples that are in interfaith marriages and see what they have to say. See what is their experience like seek mentorship before taking things more seriously. Is that helpful?
Oh, yeah.
Other questions? Yes, sir.
What advice would you give to guys who are having like trouble with like confidence, like the ability to actually confidently ask a girl out?
Yeah. There's a kind of silly movie called We Bought a Zoo. It stars Matt Damon and Scarlett Johansson, right? And like, I don't remember why I bought that movie and why we watched it, but at the end, the recommendation was, if you just have courage for 10 seconds, just begin. Everything else, you'll figure it out as you go. So if you're like, I feel really incompetent about asking that particular girl out, but I'm interested. All right, go and do a bad job starting, and then see where it goes. She might think you're really cute and think that it's really adorable that you're fumbling with your words. And she might be just very grateful that a guy is asking her out right now, even if it sounds like some sort of weird invitation that, you know, like, do the best with what you've got when you've got it.
But the movie is an interesting. It might even be inspiring to watch. But there's the scene where there's the literal. It's like 10 seconds. 10 seconds. Okay, 1, 2, hi. You know, it's like 10 seconds. You can do anything for 10 seconds. So to have that going on, yeah.
Any other questions?
We can also hang around for a little bit too.
We can also hang out for a little bit if there are people who have less public questions. Because sometimes that comes up on a topic that's touching things like sexuality and sacraments and interpersonal relationships. Sound good? We'll be around for a bit. Also, just FYI, we've been podcasting for like 5-ish years. And at one point we did like an 8-part series of our podcast specifically on dating. We have like a link if you want those 8 episodes, just those 8 episodes. And then it's like a QR code. You give us your email address. We email you the link to it. And then you listen to those and you say, Joseph and Crystal, where were you? I want more of, and then you listen to the rest of our podcasts, and then
Or you can be like, unsubscribe.
yeah. Those are the 2 basic responses we get from people. It's like either we like the stuff that you're saying, or and both are okay.
Yeah. So we got these little guys to hand out, and then there's some bigger ones.
I do have one question.
Yes,
You can answer it or not.
always.
It's not super well articulated, so I'm just going to throw the idea out there. Various modes of communication and appropriateness to the various levels of dating.
Yes, this is a great question. Don't ask people out on text message.
So are you speaking more
Is that
about like the
kind of-
different medium of exchange,
That's right.
or the matter that is being exchanged?
Both.
Okay, so medium-wise, gentlemen, one of the things about asking a woman out, in person, live, like face-to-face, that is the ideal. If you are texting someone, stop. And then at least call them. But probably just in person, it's a low-stakes thing, as long as you treat it as such.
Yeah, I think what we've seen is a lot of people getting very emotionally involved over like text message or some other messaging or social media communication. And you lose so much of the person in that way of communicating, and it's really easy to start to create this person into something different than what they actually are. So communicating a lot when you're typing is just you're losing too much. And so as much as can be done real time, whether that's over the phone, but in person is best. If this is part of the whole having a happy lasting marriage, is that you want to actually be in touch with the reality of the person that you are signing up to spend the rest of your life with. And the best way to do that is we're embodied persons, and is to do that when you're like in their space.
Most of our
ish.
dating relationship was long distance. And so one of the things that we held ourselves to, we only texted logistical questions about when we were going to talk on the phone or over video. we weren't having conversations over text. We were having conversations in real time, at least voice to voice. So that was the medium question, the matter of what is being communicated. There is a lot that we could say about this. I will give a brief example. I have a friend who made it his mission by like the third date with a girl to share like all of the worst things he'd ever done.
No.
So some of you realized that that's maybe not the right approach. He is still single, yes, that is true. There is like an appropriate level of intimacy that you walk through with someone. Now, the Catholic philosopher Dietrich von Hildebrand, he believes in a thing, yeah, right? He actually thinks that something like love at first sight is a reality. It can happen, but he doesn't say that that's what every marriage is founded on. And he doesn't say that if it was founded on love at first sight, that means that there is no suffering. So for those people, there might be like a faster sharing of heart-to-heart communication and the establishing of an I-thou communion. But for most of us, it's a little bit more of a muddle and a little bit more of a gradual process that we do at some point talk about in our podcast, I believe.
Yeah.
Yes, Father.
You had mentioned how, like, you said, I think you want to take your marriage more seriously, take dating less seriously, or something along those lines.
We did several times.
Yeah. In an age, in a culture where, like, people are like dating in a sense less, where like a lot of people have never been asked out on a date, where like your tendency is like, oh my gosh, like where you take dating super seriously. You had mentioned like being very clear in those first few dates. Can you like literally give an example of how you would have that conversation in such a way as to reduce the like seriousness that the other person might be assigning to being asked out? Is that it? Do you understand that?
Yeah, this is what you did with me.
This is, yeah, literally, I would just say the things. I would say,
So we can go, this is like literally, we get done with our first date and Joseph said, I had a really nice time. And I said, I did too.
I said, I think I would like to take you out on another date at some point.
And I said, I think I would like that also. So then this happened, we went
Well,
on.
and then I was like, so just to be clear though, like that all that this was, it was a very lovely first date. Magical even. Magical. But all it was a first date. And so I wanted to communicate that's the level of commitment it was. It was just a first date.
So then after we'd been, I think, on 2 or 3 dates, he sat me down and he said,
Been on a couple of dates, and I wanted to let you know that I've enjoyed them, and got her feedback that she actually did.
I also did.
I just want to let you know that I still feel free to ask other women out at this point in terms of my level of commitment. And if anyone asked you out, that I would be perfectly fine with that, because that's where we're at, I think.
I think he also said, I don't plan on kissing you or holding your hand, just so you know that that's where we're at. It's like, okay.
I still enjoyed the dates, but that's not how we're going to express our relationship.
So then, after a couple more dates,
I sat her down and I said, I've enjoyed the recent dates. And she also had. And I said,
yeah.
I think I've reached to the point where I'm definitely not going to ask anyone else out. And I think I would actually be bothered if someone asked you out at this point. So I thought maybe we could make it a thing where the two of us keep on going on dates with each other.
I thought that sounded nice. And then and then an hour later, somebody called me his girlfriend and I panicked.
Because I didn't use that language.
But is that helpful? But I think you just saying
Just say
it.
the thing.
And it's even okay to say, this might be awkward, but I just want to be clear.
Also, we might not be in the same place. I might think it was a really great time, and you might not have, and that's okay. It doesn't mean I didn't have a great time if you didn't, and it doesn't mean that you ought to have had a good time just because I enjoyed it. Yes.
Problem is, I get to that point way too quickly.
Yeah, I agree. I like to affirm people. I like to affirm people. I'm sorry.
But yeah, I have a tendency of getting to that point way too quickly. And I'm thinking, now who is this man? But that's more with that contentment thing and not being worried and just giving it to God.
Yeah, if we know who we are and we spend time looking at the Lord who's looking at us and loving us, we're not going to seek the same kind of affirmation from romantic interest. And if we have good friends who are encouraging us, we're not going to seek all of our encouragement from a romantic interest. And that is really important. So gentlemen, be good brothers to one another, and ladies, be good sisters to one another. I feel like there was something else about his question. Do you remember?
Not right now. Do you
It
want
was-
to see if...
Oh yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
I don't know, I do this guy thing where I say what I think and I feel like a jerk sometimes.
Yeah.
You know? So,
Yeah.
and then I'm like, wait a second, I feel like she interpreted it that way when I was just trying to, you know.
Yeah.
So when you said, you know, hey, this is what I'm actually thinking here, you know. Were you like how did you know what I'm saying? Like, how did you feel? Like, did you just work in, is that like a tact thing, or just like, or just like, I don't know. There's an awkwardness, like, I want to be real.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
Okay, so I told some people, I've told a lot of people that this is how we handle things, and
Yeah,
a
yeah.
lot of people were like, I can't believe he said that.
Yeah. So,
And then they would be like, actually, that's really refreshing.
Yeah.
So here's the thing that happens for a lot of women is that what's usually going on is that they're very confused.
Because men are confusing.
Because men are confusing and they don't say things. And so when a guy does say something, they are often like, I can't believe you just said that. But then they're like, I can't believe you just said that. That was awesome. Right? So I think like they might, like women might not, they might be like, I don't know, like put off or like surprised. But I do think that ultimately when the dust settles, they'll be like, oh, I actually know where I stand with you. And I appreciate that.
And just because they might not be in the same place as you, or they might not have had the same experience as you, doesn't mean that you were wrong in expressing interest, or after a date telling them that how the date went according to you, right? Like, this is one of the interesting things. If you are interested in someone, you had a reason to be interested in them. You weren't wrong. This is like a failure-free path. As long as you're being free in your action and clear in your speech, you know, like, I was interested in this girl and I asked her out and then she said no. That doesn't mean it was a failure or that you did something wrong or that you were wrong to be interested in her.
You could check your pulse too.
Like, are you still living? Are you still breathing? Breathe against a mirror. That's what they used to do. If you fog it up, that means you're still alive. But like, yeah, this is one of the things. Just because that person might not be reciprocating doesn't mean you're doing it wrong. Doesn't mean that they weren't interesting. Like, you want to reveal the fact that you were engaged to not me years ago.
And I realized at some point that I did not want to marry him. And I thought, well, I got this really pretty ring. He's a good guy. I still don't want to marry him. So I didn't. I called off the engagement. And that was a hard thing, but it was worth it.
But then years later, she looked back and said, why?
Yeah, I was like, we dated for like 2 years. We were engaged to be married. Why did I waste all of that time? And then I reconnected with him and talked with him on the phone, and we had this great conversation. I was like, oh, I really enjoyed talking to him. We had great conversations. That wasn't a waste of my life. I wasn't being a fool. But there were some things that came out that made him not a good person for me to spend the rest of my life with. That wasn't a failure. I learned a lot.
Is that helpful?
I think
Okay.
Maybe not all the way.
not all the way.
Not all the way.
No, yeah.
Is there more?
Frank's being frank here. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, so you addressed a good amount of it. Of just like, I want to be clear, but sometimes being clear and being frank, you know, for me at least, comes across with this overtone of just not caring. But I'm, you know what I'm saying? Just communicating.
Right.
And I think it was nice to hear from your side that a communication, isn't, if you're trying to communicate what's true, that it's not this, like, it may come across like, at first.
Mm-hmm.
But I think the earnestness kind of inferred a little bit to both what you're saying.
Yeah. There's also like this helpful exercise you can do with someone where you can say something and then you can ask them like, what did you just hear?
Okay.
And then they can say something and you can say, this is what I just heard. And then
That's nice.
you can confirm, the thing that you heard was that you thought that I'm still interested in you, but I was very clear that I wasn't. Okay, let's address this again until we get it straight, right? And so to just say, like, it's worth saying, I said this thing, your response seemed disproportionate. Can we make sure that what you heard is what I said and what I said is what I meant? Is that helpful?
No, that's good.
Yeah, great. Okay. Good?
Yay,
Great.
let's give 'em a round of
Thanks.
applause.